Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Recently I was asked if I would like to check out a review copy of the brand new 2-player starter set for Dystopian Wars, Sturginium Skies. This is by Warcradle Studios, a trading name of Wayland games, and is the flagship product from their Dystopian Age series of miniatures games, which also includes Wild West Exodus and the forthcoming Lost World Exodus. All of these games were brought together under a single banner back in 2017, with each offering different ways to explore the shared setting of an alternative 1870s world where science has advanced apace and 8 different factions are locked in a constant struggle for power. Dystopian Wars initially focused on naval warfare, with the previous starter set Hunt for the Prometheus providing everything necessary for 2 players to take to the high seas with Commonwealth and Enlightened fleets. But this new Sturginium Skies starter also includes aerial units. With ships, submarines, planes and dirigibles, it's possible to conduct warfare above and below the waves, broadening the scope of the theatre of war the game presents. This set also shifts attention to the Crown, that would be your tea-sipping Brits, and the Imperium, that's Central Europe under the command of the Kaiser from his seat of power in Berlin. And you aren't just getting a few units for a little scrap in this box. This may not be the biggest box for a starter set I've ever seen, but it's heavy and stuffed to the point of bulging. Looking at the back, you can see the 2 forces arrayed in all their glory, along with all the dice, tokens, cards, templates, and the campaign book and rules book. Obviously, we're going to take a closer look at all of that in a moment. At first glance, the forces seem a good size. The game is designed for play on a 6ft by 4ft board, but it's also possible to play smaller skirmishes using a 4ft by 4ft area, and I would say there is easily enough here to fill a battle zone of that size. The only thing that immediately stands out as being missing here is a punch board with some rocks or islands, something that would make it easy to get a few games started straight away without having to source or make terrain. The box has this attractive slipcase cover, showing many of the new units you will be using in your encounters, and when you remove it you get this slickly presented Warcradle logo. Now we can dive into the box. Pun intended. And just look at that. As I said, this box is absolutely heaving with content. We have the rules and campaign book here, with stacks of frames underneath, and we have our tokens on the other side. And underneath we have more frames. Let's take a closer look at all of this stuff. Here are the frames of miniatures. It should be noted a lot of these miniatures can be assembled in a variety of ways. For example, you will have a basic support cruiser hull, and then you will have 3 or 4 sets of accessories to kit them out as different classes, and further options for interchangeable weapon loadouts. There is a recommended unit list for each scenario in the included campaign, but all the unit information is available online, so you can go with whichever build options you are happiest with. First of all, you get 2 of these. This is the Stark Imperium frame and includes all of the components to make the mighty Stark Imperium Sky Fortress dirigible. You can already tell this thing is going to be huge when it's assembled. This frame can also be used to make a Zeppelin class Sky Fortress, and looking at all the little ordnance bits and bobs, I am getting some serious Aeronautica Imperialis vibes from this kit. Here's how it all looks in the assembly guide. You have 2 pages telling you how to build the fortress, and then 2 pages going through the 2 different build options. Next up we have 2 of the Imperium aerial squadron frames. Each frame has a short range squadron token, called an SRS token in the rules, and then you get enough components to make 2 Kriegssturm assault airships and 4 aerial Jaeger fast destroyers. The Kriegssturms can alternatively be assembled as Nuremberg heavy airships, and the Jaegers can be built as Munich aerial destroyers, which look almost exactly the same. Here you can see all the options in the assembly instructions. These don't look like they're going to be too difficult to put together. The aerial squadron frame also includes 4 cute little aerial escorts. Then you get 2 frames for the support cruisers. Each frame has another 2 of the SRS tokens, and then you get all the options for building your ships. The recommended build is 2 Reiter cruisers and 4 Sigma destroyers, but you can also make Volsung strike cruisers and Toten destroyers. You can see in the build instructions, the first page shows the instructions for the basic hull, and then you get 4 pages of instructions for the different cruiser options. A lot of these are going to look quite similar once they are assembled. I am probably going to forget what I'm fielding more than once in my first few games. But that's it for the Imperium forces, so we move on to look at the Crown units. There are 3 frames of Crown aerial squadrons. These frames are going to net you 3 Pride and War rotors, 3 Tintagel battle rotors and 6 Saxon scout rotors. There are no alternative builds on these frames, so no analysis paralysis agonising over your options this time. They also look pretty simple to put together. The instructions for the Pryden covers 2 pages, but instructions for the rest fit on a single page. Finally, you get 3 of the Canadian Frontline Squadron frames. This is where you get options galore. Glancing at the scenarios for the campaign, it appears you need 2 Toronto control cruisers and 1 Halifax class shield cruiser. But once you have built a basic cruiser hull, you can kit it out as a Bonadventure strike cruiser, Halifax shield cruiser, Newfoundland attack cruiser, Toronto control cruiser, or Yukon auxiliary cruiser. Often the variations are quite subtle, and you can see that often you have the option of interchangeable weapons as well. It's an incredibly versatile kit. The final components on these frames make 6 Orca Hunter submarines. Those are going to be nice and quick to build. And obviously you get a whole mess of bases and flying stems for the flying units, and round bases for the SRS tokens. The ships, however, don't have bases at all. There is one more piece of plastic in the box. It's this weird thing, which is actually 3 things. This is your measuring stick, which has a hinge in the middle and gives me some serious Dreadfleet flashbacks. Then you have the turn template here, and then you have a weapon template that works with several different types of weapons. It's nice these are in plastic. I actually wouldn't have minded if they were card though. And while that is it for the plastic in this set, we've hardly started. Next up, you get 2 sets of custom dice, and when I say sets, I mean absolutely gobs of dice. You get 40 action dice. That may seem a lot, but this game is all about rolling massive dice pools, and it also makes use of opposed dice rolls and exploding dice, so you're really going to roll a lot of these in any engagement with the enemy. The dice have 5 different symbols and 1 blank face. The symbols are simple enough. You get hits, double hits, and exploding hits. The exploding hits count as 2 hits and then let you roll 1 additional action dice. Then you get a counter and a double counter, which negate incoming hits when you use your defences. And I guess while we're talking about these dice, I can touch briefly on rules here. Dystopian Wars is pretty densely packed. While the rule set isn't extensive, it has quite a lot of granular detail baked into it. Units have lots of weapons, lots of special rules, and lots of options open to them at any given point. There are relatively complicated procedures for unit coherency, damage that scales dependent on the unit's size, and special maneuvers. For example, the game incorporates rules for the classic naval strategy, crossing the T. Rarely is anything as simple as declaring an attack and rolling dice, so when it comes to bringing guns to bear on a target, even a simple salvo can be seen to have layers of depth and strategy based on who is making the attack and what defences the target has. When you want to unleash hell, you have to pick a primary weapon with a relevant firing arc for your intended target, but then you also select support weapons that will add to your dice pool. These support weapons can come from the firing miniature or other miniatures in its unit, and they have to have the same qualities as the lead weapon. For example, you can't use torpedoes to support a broadside attack. And of course, they have to be in the same firing arc as well, so there's a lot to think about manoeuvring your units to get the best firing positions. Then you create your dice pool, taking into account all the weapon qualities, and this can be a lot of dice. Check out the Prussian Sky Fortress. With the Vierling autocannons, you can bring to bear a salvo of 17 dice at point blank range, 5 from the lead gun and an additional 12 from supporting guns, and some of those dice might explode, leading to additional rolls. At this point, the target may have an opportunity to use defensive abilities. Units have 2 defense stats, one for attacks made for surface level and one for attacks made from below surface level. Furthermore, if the target deployed some short-range squadrons that are in base contact with them, they can discard those squadrons to make defensive maneuvers, adding 3 dice to the pool for each squadron they discard. They also gain an additional dice for each model from their unit within 4 inches. They then roll the dice, removing hits based on the number of counters. Only then do you apply damage. To do this, refer to the target's armor value. This is the number of hits necessary to inflict 1 point of damage. So if you roll 15 hits on a target with an armor of 4, you inflict 3 damage. You deduct this total from the target's hull attribute, and if the hull attribute reaches 0, battle-ready units of mass 2 or greater are crippled, which reduces all their stats, while crippled units or units of mass 1 are removed from play. But that's not all. Each unit has a citadel stat, the citadel being the unit's core, housing all the essential machinery. If a single attack causes enough hits to equal or exceed the citadel value, then the unit takes critical damage. Units of mass 1 are instantly removed from play, while larger units have to roll a critical damage dice. And here are the critical damage dice. You get 12 in the starter set. They are custom with 6 unique faces. I won't go through what all the symbols mean here, but they are all bad. Oh, and if you roll 2 symbols the same, or you take enough damage to double your citadel value, you also suffer a catastrophic explosion. That's even more bad stuff to deal with. So you can see that even when it comes to small scuffles, there's a lot to think about and a lot of densely packed interwoven rules. This isn't a game that you are going to be able to learn and internalise on your first play, but it is the sort of game that will reward the time it takes to learn what your units are capable of and the best ways to combine your strengths and exploit your enemy's weaknesses. Another interesting aspect of the game is the disorder system, tracked with some of the tokens on the included punch boards. You actually get 2 punch boards in the starter set, which is handy as each player can have their own set to track their units. These are actually generic Dystopian Age condition tokens. They work with Wild West Exodus as well as Dystopian Wars. These tokens along the edge are for tracking hull damage, the green eyes are for marking obscured units, and the blue arrows are for marking units that have activated, but the other 3 tokens track disorder on your various craft. You pick up disorders in a number of ways, such as throwing your unit into full reverse, picking up critical damage, suffering catastrophic explosions, or colliding with stuff, and every time you take a disorder token, it escalates. The first token is the yellow one, meaning hazard, the second is the red, meaning emergency, and the third is black, meaning chaos and disarray. As you pick up these tokens, your units become less and less effective. They become less versatile, refuse to make or are unable to make certain actions, and eventually reach a situation where they are almost useless. Even then, it's possible to override these disarray tokens to make a ramming attack, usually a last gasp kamikaze attack for a vessel in the grip of panic. But if you do, you either raise your disorder level again, or you take a point of damage if you are already suffering from chaos and disarray. It's a neat way to represent how a crew can lose control of a vessel. The set also includes 2 60-card victory and valor decks. As soon as I saw these cards and how they operated, I thought they looked familiar, and then I realised they are quite similar to the fake cards from Masters of the Universe Battleground, in some ways. I don't want to get too much into this. I've probably already gone too deep into the rules for what is essentially an unboxing video, but I do think this is a cool part of the game, so I'll talk about it briefly. The cards serve 2 purposes. Firstly, at the start of each round, each player draws a card and refers to the number in the top left to determine initiative order. That card is then discarded and each player draws a hand of cards. Even here, there is a small wrinkle in the rules, as the player with initiative can choose to hold their nerve. This lets them draw 1 extra card, but then their opponent gets to move first in the round, which I thought was a neat little way of simulating the risks and rewards of waiting to see how your opponent intends to act. During each round, players can play their cards at the relevant times for different effects. They can play the cards for their victory effects if they achieve the stated conditions, in which case they are awarded the specified number of victory points. For example, this card can be played for 1 victory point immediately after destroying a mass 1 unit in a shooting attack. Alternatively, players can use cards for their valor effects. Valor effects give you powerful short-term bonuses that can really help you out in a tight spot, but every time you play a valor card, you are effectively throwing away victory points, as a card can only ever be used for victory or valor, never both. The game really does demand your absolute attention. There is so much to think about. It's certainly doing an admirable job of simulating the demands of a wide-scale battle. Now, long-time viewers of the channel will know that I tend to lean more towards streamlined, simple rule sets. I like those games where you can push the rules off the table and just play the game. But I have to admit, there is something quite exciting about this rule set. There is a real sense of capturing the various tactical maneuvers and the threats and challenges that come from naval and aerial combat. I'm not sure it's entirely my cup of tea. The sheer number of special unit rules and subsystems is a bit off-putting, but I do think it's fascinating nonetheless. I also find it interesting that despite feeling quite layered and intricate, the rules themselves aren't overly long. Here's the rules book. It seems really chunky, weighing in at 144 pages, but almost all of it is background fluff. The actual rules are just 40 pages, and that includes some scenario layouts, art, diagrams, and examples. The final component in the box is the campaign book. This gives you a brief introduction to this particular theatre of war, has all the build instructions, all the unit cards for the units in this set, and then a series of 5 narrative scenarios that string together to form the campaign. The story is that the Imperium is making moves to claim some of the Crown's territories in Canada, and the campaign covers 5 battles as beleaguered Canadian fleets try to hold out against the Prussian fleet until Crown reinforcements arrive. It looks quite fun, and the first scenario only requires 2 Kriegssturm assault airships and 2 Jaegers fighting against 2 Toronto-class control cruisers. That means you don't have to build a lot of miniatures to get started, and you don't have a huge amount of special rules to think about for your first game. Each scenario introduces new concepts, so the first is about movement and combat, the second deals with terrain, the third introduces SRS tokens, and so on. So by the time you've worked your way through all 5 missions, you should have a decent grasp of how it all works. One thing I did notice about these scenarios is the 4th and 5th require 2 squadrons of 2 Kriegssturms. This set only includes 2 Kriegssturms. I haven't figured out how you are supposed to get around that yet. I wonder if that's supposed to say 1 squadron rather than 2. But I guess that's a problem for future me to figure out. For now, let's sum up. This looks pretty good, don't it? I think there are a few things missing. Some punch-out terrain would have been nice, although of course you could just chuck a few books on the table or even cut out some card shapes to represent islands just to get started. Also, although the unit details are included in the campaign book and are also available for download online, I really would have liked to see some double-sided unit cards in the box, just to make those first few games smoother. Other than that, this seems like a pretty comprehensive introduction to the system, and for anybody looking for a relatively crunchy naval/aerial combat game that does have a bit of a learning curve and will require some dedication to get to grips with the rules, this might be something worth checking out. Sturginium Skies is available for pre-order right now from Wayland Games. The retail price is £94, which seems a good price point for the amount of content presented here. I'll put a link in the video description so you can check that out for yourself. This game is going to be available in other territories as well. You can check with your online retailer or local friendly game store of choice to see if they are going to be stocking it. I am planning some follow-up content for this game. I would like to get a small demo up and running for you, but that's it from me for now. Thank you once again to Warcradle and Wayland Games for sending in this set for me to look at, and thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone, bye bye.